the most famous dunks in basketball history. A quiet gym breathes in the stillness of early morning. The lights hum faintly above an empty court. No crowd. No cameras. Only the soft echo of sneakers brushing against hardwood. A young player stands beneath the rim, staring upward. The hoop feels distant, unreachable. A basketball rests in his hands, worn, familiar, patient. He bends his knees, jumps. For a brief moment, he rises toward something greater than himself, and then gravity pulls him back down. Again and again. Because before the roar of arenas, before the flashes of cameras, before history remembers, there's always this moment, the first attempt to rise, the language of the air. A dunk is not just a shot. It is a statement, a moment where the game leaves the ground, where time slows, where power meets grace. Basketball, by nature, is horizontal. Passes move side to side. Players flow across the court. But a dunk changes direction. It goes vertical, upward, defying something invisible. And in that defiance, it captures attention in a way nothing else can, because for a split second, a player is not running, not dribbling, but flying. Before the spotlight, there was a time when dunking was not celebrated. In fact, it was discouraged. In college basketball, it was once banned. Too dominant, too unfair, too overwhelming. The game tried to contain it, but something about the dunk refused to be controlled because it represented more than scoring. It represented force, emotion, authority, and eventually, it returned stronger than before. The first icon of flight. In the early days of modern basketball, one figure began to redefine what it meant to rise above the rim. Julius Erving, known simply as Dr. J. His dunks were not just powerful, they were poetic. He glided through the air as if time had slowed for him alone. One moment, in particular, remains etched in memory. The baseline move, starting behind the backboard, moving along the edge of impossibility, and finishing on the other side with a soft, controlled touch. It was not just a dunk. It was imagination. Mais, visible. The era of power. Then came a different kind of force. Michael Jordan. Where Erving floated, Jordan attacked. His dunks carried something sharper, more direct, more final. The free throw line dunk. A moment that seemed to stretch reality, taking off from a distance that should not allow flight, and still reaching the rim. But Jordan's greatest dunks were not always in contests. They were in games, moments where a competition was real, where defenders stood in his path. And still, he rose above them. The clash above the rim. Basketball is often a game of positioning, of angles, of timing. But a dunk removes all of that. It becomes confrontation. One player rises, another challenges, and in that moment, something is decided. Dominance or denial. Few embodied this better than Vince Carter. His dunks were not just athletic, they were explosive, unpredictable. In the 2000 Olympic Games, one moment stood above all others. A defender stood in front of him, prepared, set, and Carter leapt, not around him, not beside him, but over him. A clean, impossible elevation. A moment so shocky, it became known simply as the dunk of death, not for its violence, but for its finality. The sound of the rim. There is a sound that defines a dunk, the sharp snap of the net, the rattle of the rim. It is louder than a jump shot, more sudden, more definitive. And when it happens in a packed arena, the reaction is immediate. A surge of noise, a release of energy. Because a dunk does not ask for appreciation. It demands. Italiano, the modern explosion. As the game evolved, so did the dunk. Players became faster, stronger, more creative. and the dunk became a canvas. A place for expression, LeBron James brought power and control, a freight train in motion. Once he began his drive, stopping him felt impossible. His dunks were not just finishes, they were conclusions, statements that ended possessions with authority. Then came players like LaVine and Aaron Gordon. They turned dunking into art, into creativity, into competition beyond the game itself. Their performances in dunk contests redefined what was possible. Mid-air adjustments, impossible angles, moments that felt less like sport and more like imagination. The emotional weight of a dunk. Not all dunks are remembered for how they look. Some are remembered for when they happen. A dunk in the final moments of a game. A dunk that shifts momentum. A dunk that silences a crowd. These moments carry emotion, context, meaning. Because basketball is not just physical, it is psychological, and a dunk can change the feeling of a game in an instant. The symbol of the rim. If one object defines these moments, it is the rim, simple, unmoving, constant. Every player must reach it. Confront italiano, challenge italiano. It does not lower itself. It does not adjust. It remains, and in that consistency, it becomes a measure, not just of height but of effort, of determination, of how far a player is willing to rise. What the greatest dunks reveal. The most famous dunks are not remembered only because they were impressive. They are remembered because they reveal something deeper. Courage, timing, confidence, the willingness to attempt something uncertain, to rise when failure is possible. Because every dunk begins with risk, with the chance that it might not succeed. But the greatest players take that risk, again and again. Beyond the highlight, in today's world, dunks are shared instantly. Clipped, replayed, viewed millions of times. But behind every highlight is repetition, practice, failure, moments that are never seen. Because the dunk, like all great things in basketball, is built in silence. Long before it is celebrated, the return to the empty gym. Return again to that quiet gym. The same player, the same rim, the same ball. He jumps, misses, tries again. There is no audience, no reaction, only effort. Because every famous dunk in history began here, in anonymity, in persistence, in the quiet decision to keep trying. Final reflection. The most famous dunks in basketball history are more than moments. They are expressions of what the human body can do, of what the human mind believes is possible. They remind us that the game is not only played on the ground, but above it, in the space where gravity is challenged, where limits are tested, and where, for a brief moment, a player rises beyond expectation. Some shots are remembered for precision, some for timing, but dunks are remembered for feeling. Because when a player leaves the ground and the world watches in silence before impact, there is a shared understanding that something extraordinary is about to happen. And for that brief moment in the air, basketball becomes something more than a game. It becomes flight.